Welcome, everyone. I'm Stephen Garvey, founder, leader of National Citizens Alliance. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I'm going to be looking at the big picture on trade, and I'll be presenting the facts just so you and your family can make the best decisions going forward. And trade is relatively complex, but in a big scheme of things, it's not complex. So I'm going to simplify it tonight, and I hope this will resonate with you and you can share it with your friends. And again, at the end of the day, make the best decision for you and your family and our country. And before I get into it, I want to let everyone know that the National Citizens Alliance is holding a rally in South Calgary at 1 p.m. If you want more information on that, contact us at info@nationalcitizensalliance.ca or give us a call at 1-833-822-8330. It's on our homepage at nationalcitizensalliance.ca. It's on our social media, Facebook. So take a look at that. But that's on Saturday at 1 p.m. And the following day, we're holding a small conference in St. John, New Brunswick. And we got some very good speakers for that small conference. So please try and come out. It's a lot better than just sitting at home and watching TV or just sitting idle. Get out. You can get out and meet people and expand your perspective on things. Also share your input. So please try to come out to either events. You'll meet a lot of interesting people and you have an opportunity to share your perspective. And I'm going to shift right into this. And I have a slide here I'm going to bring up. So the theme is trade, but we're looking at good versus evil. National trade policy versus globalist trade policy. Non-establishment versus establishment. Non-career politician versus career politician. Nationalist versus globalist. Again, good versus evil. And this policy, for the sake of simplicity, we're looking at the NCA, Garvey, and then we're going to look at Bernier. He's been spinning a lot of stuff in the media. It's, we view it as subterfuge, which is deception, but we're going to look at his policies to really see what this Bernier stands for. But in our opinion, he's just an extension of the establishment conservatives, the liberals, the NDP, the Greens. They're all in the same bucket, the bucket of globalism. That's what they're in. So when we look at him, apply it to those other parties. The National Citizens Alliance, we are nationalists. We believe in putting our people first. We are anti-globalists. This does not mean we're against trade, as we're going to show tonight, but it's about our country, our people. That's what matters to us. Everything extends from that. We don't take a global world outlook. We don't believe we should be helping immigrants before our own people. We don't believe we should be helping other countries before our own country. But globalists have a different perspective. They believe in helping immigrants before our own people. They believe in helping other countries, and it's bigger than that. And we're going to get into this global world order and these globalist corporations and the unfairness behind them. So the first item here in trade, the National Citizens Alliance supports smart, fair, equitable trade. And in an ideal world, the NCA supports free trade. If things were all equal, wages, regulations, there was no unfair trade practices, of course, free trade makes sense. But everyone, that is not the real world. There's all kinds of trade deception going on, trade dumping, tariffs, duties, currency devaluation like in China. to get a trade advantage, and that's the real world. So we believe in smart, fair, equitable trade that is in the best interest of our people and our country. And we believe that's the smartest way forward. So I'm going to juxtapose this to Bernie. Quote, he believes in aggressive free trade. This is also known as globalist unfair trade. Globalists, the middlemen, get everything. Producers get nothing. Consumers get high prices. And I'll give you an example of this aggressive free trade, which is basically just globalist unfair trade. The Cargill Corporation. It's one of the largest trader of grains, largest privately held corporation in the world. It doesn't produce, but it buys for minimal cost. It's kind of like a Walmart. Its intention is to consolidate the food system into a globalist system where it's all controlled, like a global world order. It pushes down local farmers, local entrepreneurs. And this is what this aggressive free trade agenda of Bernays supports. Companies like Cargill Corporation. I'm going to shift here now. The National Citizens Alliance does not support globalist trade deals such as TPP, which was signed onto by Canada on January 23rd of 2018. These deals are good for government and globalists, but not the country like Canada and its producers and consumers. Remember that. We reject these big globalist trade deals. And I'm going to contrast this to Bernie. He praises globalist trade deals like TPP, and he wants more of them. These globalist trade deals, they support more government, more globalist control, because that's what they're about. They're about these big trade deals involving globalist interests, government getting in between producers, consumers on both sides, supply and demand. We reject these deals. We believe they're against our national interests because it means more government, more globalist control. And we saw that in the recent North American trade agreement. There was a free trade commission mechanism in there. And that's just part of globalist control. That was actually built into that agreement. And what these globalist trade deals do is erode our sovereignty, our Canadian sovereignty. They pit investor interests over Canadian interests. So this is a real attack on Canada, its people, and we got to reject these big deals, everyone. We got to support local Canadian businesses. Buy Canadian. Don't support the Walmarts of the world, the Cargill corporations of the world. These are just globalist control organizations. I'm going to go back to the slide here, and we're going to ship down here. And we say here, we need less government, not more middlemen. We need less government, less middlemen, not more. And that's what these globalist trade deals are doing. We need government, globalists out of trade. And remember, free trade is just a slogan for government and globalist control. True free trade means no government involvement, no globalist middleman. That's true free trade. When you hear these career politicians in Ottawa talk about free trade, they are being dishonest with you because they are all tied to these globalist trade deals. Remember Harper with FIPA, the 35-year secret trade deal. This recent so-called free trade deal with the EU. The Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is all about globalist interests It has nothing to do with the average Canadian. It doesn't benefit the average Canadian. And basically what's going to happen, oh, well, I'm going to get back to that. I want to get back to this point here. I'm going to shift down here. And I'm going to touch on it here. The National Citizens Alliance rejects free trade with China. We do not believe this would be good for Canadian industry, Canadian workers, for the country as a whole. China is a communist regime. It's got abysmal human rights. There's sweatshops. There's trade abuses such as currency manipulation. And the average yearly income in China is around $14,000 a year Canadian. In Canada, we're over $51,000. That's 3.64 times more in average yearly income. The average hourly wage in China is $3.60 per hour. Sri Lanka is 50 cents per hour. In Canada, right now, as of July 2018, it's 24.83. So how can we compete with a country like China, this communist regime, which controls everyone in that country? They have suspect trade practices. How can we compete with China? I'm asking you, how can we compete? Our wages are so much higher. There's way less regulation in China, and there's suspect trade measures going on with that country. It does not make sense, everyone. And what would happen if we ever had free trade with China? These big corporations in Canada would just further set up shop there, and then they would send their goods into Canada without any tariffs or duties. And where would our jobs go? Where would our jobs go? And what about our manufacturing sector, our textile industry? It would be absolutely decimated. So I'm going to contrast this now. We look at Bernier, who we view as a globalist. He supports free trade with the communist regime China, the People's Party of China. He wants free trade with the People's Party of China. Again, remember, this is globalist trade. Globalist middlemen get everything in these big trade deals. Producers get nothing. Consumers get high prices. And remember, free trade with China, which Bernier states, is really unfair globalist trade. Because in true free trade, there's no government involvement. There's no globalist middleman. So you have a clear choice here. If you support Bernier and the establishment conservatives, the liberals, the NDP, the whole racket in Ottawa, you're supporting this globalist agenda, which includes so-called free trade with China. If you support the NCA, we will reject that. We will fight that at every turn. I'm going to shift down here, and I'm going to talk about tariffs now. The National Citizens Alliance believes that tariffs should only be used to offset unfair, inequitable foreign trade practices. It's a way for us to counter. It's like when Trump was putting tariffs on us, we counter with tariffs back. That's when we would use them. We would use them to protect key Canadian industry and jobs, such as our steel products or aluminum products or our auto industry. We would encourage Canadians to buy Canadian. But we believe tariffs is a necessary tool because the world is not perfect, everyone. And there are countries that abuse trade. They dump products, they subsidize products, and then they dump them. They have duties, they have tariffs, they do currency devaluation. All this stuff is going on behind the scenes. So we need to protect our national industries, the Canadian worker, Canada as a whole. So tariffs is a measure that can do that. You don't want to abuse it, but it can be a measure to counter countries that are trying to take advantage of us. If we contrast this with Bernie, he says no tariffs. He doesn't want any tariffs. Yet, ironically, he supports globalist trade deals like TPP, which mask protectionism through the government and globalist middlemen that are part of those agreements. So this is just a contradiction here. To say no tariffs, it doesn't make sense. Why would you say no tariffs when it can be an effective way to protect our industries, protect our workers? Also, these globalist deals, as I mentioned, are riddled with protectionism through the government and globalist middlemen involved in those agreements. I'm going to shift now. We want to end excessive tariffs, like in the dairy board. As everyone knows, there's 270% plus tariffs on U.S. Dairy products, and over 300% even in some cases. And we don't think we think it's good to protect Canadian industries when necessary, but they should not be excessive, because then that's hurting Canadian consumers. And also, we should be encouraging to produce locally. There's no reason why all our milk has to come from Quebec and Ontario. When they're out in the prairies and in BC, we could be producing our own milk and be self-sufficient and not dependent on Quebec and Ontario. This would be better product and lower costs of the product. So that's something we need to encourage. And I contrast this to Bernie, and he talks about ending excessive tariffs like in the dairy board. Yeah, and that's something we support. That is hurting the Canadian consumer. At the end of the day, that is wrong and it shouldn't be allowed. That is part of crony capitalism. And my final point tonight is that the NCA believes in creating the best economic business environment for our country. And we believe that starts with cutting the bloated federal bureaucracy. We are committed to a 50% cut in that bureaucracy upon forming government. We believe in lower and less taxation, which includes a flat tax, ending the carbon tax, and taking a close look at GST, which is basically paying for the welfare systems in Canada, which we want to cut back as well. If we contrast Bernie, he talks about cut to the federal bureaucracy, but he has no specific numbers. He talks about a flat tax, but our numbers are lower than what he's proposing. And I have to qualify this here. Harper promised to cut the federal bureaucracy back in 2005. But please remember the fact, the bureaucracy grew by 34% from 2000 to 2010, topping at 282,000 plus in 2010. And we call out the lies. These are crony, career politicians and government hacks who are just spouting cut government, but then the government grows under them. They're basically lying to you. They're lying to you. Harper never cut the bureaucracy. It grew under him. And I've got the data right here. I want to show it to you. It's right here. You can see the data. And again, in 2010, it peaked at 282,980 in terms of the total population of the federal public service. In 2011, it was 282,352. And right now in 2018, it's less, 273,571. So it peaked under Harper, the size of the public service. well into his term. And you see it's gradually growing under Trudeau, but it's still less under Harper. Those are the facts, everyone. Those are the facts. So I'm just going to review things. It's probably a lot of information, but I'm just going to review it again and then wrap this up. So again, this is about good versus evil. The NCA supports smart, fair, equitable trade. We support free trade in an ideal world, but we don't live in an ideal world. We have to be pragmatic and realistic. In contrast, Bernie and the rest of the establishment support aggressive free trade, globalist unfair trade. The NCA opposes these globalist trade deals that erode our sovereignty, that create more government, more globalist middlemen. They hurt our producers, they hurt our Canadian workers. In contrast, Bernie and the establishment, they praise these globalist trade deals like TPP, and they want more. And that means more government, more globalist control. And the NCA believes we need less government, less globalist middleman. The NCA rejects free trade with China, and Bernie supports free trade with China, which in our opinion would decimate our manufacturing sector and we would lose an incredible amount of jobs. It would be unbelievable. This is nonsensical. This is only catering to the globalists. And the NCA believes that we should use tariffs as countermeasures to unfair trade practices by other countries. Whereas Bernie says no tariffs, yet he supports globalist trade deal. It doesn't make sense, that policy. Again, we want to end excessive tariffs, and just like Bernie does, that's just common sense. And we have to create the conditions for better economic conditions in Canada. So I hope that helps everyone for understanding trade. And it's just looking at the big picture. You make up your own mind. Do you support the establishment globalist agenda? How is this globalist agenda, which means more government, more globalist middleman, less Canadian sovereignty, is in you and your family's best interest? How is it in the best interest of your children and their future? We have to put our people first. We have to put our country first. We have to have smart, fair, equitable trade. We can't be overrun by these globalists. So, in closing, this is about good versus evil. And remember that the lesser of the two evils, in this case, in Ottawa, the lesser of the 5 evils in Ottawa, which are all globalists, it is still evil. And we encourage Canadians to choose the road less traveled and thereby choose true change and the hope that is part of it. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight. I want to wish everyone a great night. Please share this message if it resonates with you and join the NCA at nationalcitizensalliance.ca.